Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2 is now out. If you're interested in learning more about some of the most bizarre, strange, and even terrifying crimes that have taken place in Japan over the last few decades, then make sure to grab your copy now. You can find 25 new cases of missing persons, unsolved mysteries, and truly bizarre crimes that still confuse people today. That's Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2, out now. This week, we're heading to the Chubu region in central Japan. This area is full of tall, rugged mountains that see a lot of climbers and a lot of snow. The area also has a long and often violent history, but what stories do the people who live there today have to share with us? Well, first up, two colleagues take a fishing trip there and end up at a hot spring that will, it seems, change at least one of their lives forever. Find out why in Clay Doll. This happened over a decade ago now, but I visited the Kiso area for a 3-day, 2-night fishing trip. Our company had planned annual leave in June, so I got in my car with a colleague and off we went. It was sunny on the first day, and we caught a decent amount of fish. But that evening, there was a thunderstorm, so we had to stay in the car. I didn't really sleep much that night. It continued raining the next day, but I put on my raincoat and threw out my line. Still, by 4 p.m, it had gotten so bad that I had to call it quits. The weather didn't look like it would improve anytime soon, so we discussed going home early. But we decided for the time being to head into town, have a drink, and then maybe spend the night in a business hotel. We found a narrow side road while driving down the highway, and on it was a wooden sign that said, Ebisu Hot Springs. It looked extremely old, but it was no doubt a hot spring lodging, so we decided to check it out. After turning down the side road, we drove uphill until the paved road ended, and then we found ourselves on the mountain itself. The hot spring wasn't in the guidebook we have, and it didn't appear on the car navigation either, so I was a little worried. But we found an old man getting into his work truck nearby, so we asked him for help. According to him, there was indeed a small hot spring lodging, but the owners were an elderly couple, and the building had fallen into disrepair. Now, only relatives or friends stayed there. But the hot spring itself was free to use, and of the highest quality. At any rate, we kept driving, but the higher we went, the more sulfur we smelt in the air, even with the windows closed. I think we were still near the foot of the mountain, but there were now less trees and the mountain slope looked white. Steam rose from various spots, and just ahead, we could see the hot spring lodging. It had a thatched roof, making it feel old, but it didn't seem to have been done deliberately to look that way. It appeared to be an actual old farmhouse, turned into a lodging. And the sign on it said, Ebisu Hot Springs, Source. There was a large open space in front of the building, so I parked the car there and then made my way over to the entrance. There were 4 large glass sliding doors, but there didn't appear to be a lobby or anything. Hello? I called out, and before long, an elderly couple appeared. As we spoke, they said the lodgings were no longer in operation, but seeing as we had come all this way, they didn't mind us staying the night. We could also use the bath, but they didn't have much food on hand. I asked them how much it would cost, and it was surprisingly cheap. So after talking it over, we agreed to spend the night. They showed us to the second floor, and the building was deeper than it appeared from the outside. There were several doors on both sides of the hall. At the very end, there were 2 rooms. One 6 tatami mats large, and the other 8. The woman then spread out some beds in the 6 tatami mat room for us. We laid down, but with nothing to do, we tried to watch some TV. It wouldn't turn on. It wasn't like there was no electricity in the room, so I guess they just hadn't adjusted for the signal or something. At any rate, before long, the woman returned with some dinner for us. It was a meat hot pot with some wild vegetables dressed in sesame sauce. She also brought us some beer, so I was most satisfied. After dinner, we had nothing else to do, so we decided to take a bath. We went downstairs to ask about it, and the owner pointed us to the stairs that would take us to the bathhouse underground. We went down the narrow, steep wooden staircase, and at the bottom there was a single wooden door. It seemed to lead to a mixed bath, but we were the only people there anyways. I opened the door and was shocked. It was like a cavern bath, made up of both large and small rocks with a high ceiling and dim lighting. There was no changing room, but there was a bamboo basket nearby, so we put our clothes in there. There also wasn't a wash area, but the bath itself was rather large. This place is amazing. It's like they dug right into the mountain itself. They'd have no end of customers if they advertised it a little more. The smell is also crazy. Is the sulfuric gas not dangerous? There were also some small cracks in the rocks where the wind blew in from. The water was white and hot, and about a quarter of the other side was filled with yellow mineral deposits. The surface of the water bubbled, as though the hot spring was gushing out from there. I sat by the entrance, while my colleague sat at the far side. The water felt fantastic. But then, suddenly, the mineral deposits behind my colleague started to rise. I thought it was a large mass of gas, but then a figure made of clay stood up. It was around the same height as a man, with a smooth, bald head. Its eyes were simply holes in its head, and it didn't have a nose or mouth. Liquid mud dripped from all over its body. I screamed and jumped up. "What the hell?" my colleague said, also jumping up. "Behind you! Behind you!" I said, pointing. But as my colleague turned around, the clay doll fell apart and fell back into the water, splashing my colleague's waist as it did so. I dragged him out of the water and told him what I'd just seen, but he only saw the end of the mud falling apart, so he didn't believe me. At any rate, we got out of the bath, and when we got back to our room, again I told him what I saw. "Don't be stupid. It was just the mud moving." And it was such a nice bath too. He really didn't care about what I was saying. I started to wonder if maybe I'd just seen it wrong. After that, we briefly chatted about fishing some more and then went to bed. The next morning it was sunny, and my colleague asked if I wanted to take a morning bath with him, but I refused. "I'm telling you, nothing weird happened," he said when he got back. We ate breakfast, paid the bill, thanked the owners, and then left. We headed for a nearby mountain stream, and the fishing that day was surprisingly good. We fished until midday and then went home. And that was that. After that, both my colleague and I got married, and we still work at the same company as well. However, my colleague doesn't yet have any children, and his wife miscarried 3 different times. I don't think it has anything to do with what happened at that hot spring, though. This next story is an old folk tale said to come from Niigata, but is it really just a legend, or might there be some truth to this terrifying tale? Find out in Human Pillar. I forget where this happened, but this is a folk tale I vaguely remember. So, there was this monster or something that lorded over a pond on top of a mountain, and he discussed with the others how they could flood the nearby village and take that land for themselves. The only way to build a dike that wouldn't collapse would be to bury human pillars inside, but the humans didn't know that, so they had nothing to worry about. The monsters all laughed about it. However, a travelling monk happened to overhear them talking. He tried to flee, but the monsters noticed and caught him. They then warned him that if he valued his life, he wouldn't say anything to anyone before they let him go. The monk wished to flee, but as time passed, he felt more and more bad for the villagers, so he gave in and told them everything. The villagers panicked and started to reinforce the dike, but if what that monster said was true, then the only way to protect the village would be through a human pillar. As they debated what to do, the monk stepped up. "I broke my promise with the monsters, so it's over for me. And if so, then I will become the human pillar for you to protect this village." He offered to become the pillar himself, and once the dike was completed, the village was saved and the villagers enshrined the monk. However, as more and more time passed, the location of this village was forgotten. That was basically how the story went. Then one day, a large construction project was to begin on that same land the folktale took place. After digging several meters into the ground, they found a large earthenware pot. Inside it, they found human bones and personal effects that appeared to belong to a monk. The people decided they must be the bones of the monk who saved the village in that story, and now they're displayed in a museum, lit up by lights from below. Sorry for all the rambling. Because of this story, I thought that the legends of human pillars might not actually be fairy tales. I don't know if such a moving story actually happened or not, but I felt bad for him, seeing him lit up like that. There were also photos, so he kind of looked like a skeleton in a haunted house or something. I have some information that might be related to that human pillar story that was here a while ago, so let me write it down. Human Pillar Memorial Temple. The travelling monk who became a human pillar to stop a landslide. The legend comes back to life. Long ago, there used to be frequent landslides in the Terano area of Itakura Town, Niigata Prefecture. Fields were destroyed, houses flattened, and numerous people suffered. Then, a travelling monk from Shinano came over the Kurokura Pass. He was shocked by the state of the land, and thinking he might be able to help the people, he proposed that he would become a human pillar they could bury underground. This legend has remained in Itakura Town since long ago. In 1937, villagers doing farm work discovered an earthenware pot in the ground, estimated to have come from the Kamakura period. Inside, they found human bones, proving that this story was actually true. The pot and bones were then enshrined at the Human Pillar Memorial Temple to console the sacred monk's soul. A young boy visits his grandparents' house in Yamanashi each spring to dig up bamboo shoots, but during this particular visit, he and his grandfather encounter something strange in the mountains. What's lurking out there with them? Find out in Orange Smell. This happened around 20 years ago, when I was in the 4th grade and visiting my grandpa's house in Yamanashi to dig up bamboo shoots. I don't remember if it was the spring holidays or Golden Week, but every spring we went to the mountain behind my grandpa's house to dig up bamboo shoots. And so, on this particular morning, we were digging up shoots on the mountain like we always did. My parents worked together while I paired with my grandpa. He was really good at finding shoots and I just dug where he told me to. We collected lots of shoots and it was really fun. And thanks to that, our basket was full of shoots by shortly after midday. My parents also seemed to have done well for themselves, so they were talking about how it was about time to head back. But I pleaded with Grandpa to stay just a little longer to dig up some more, and he agreed. And so my dad took the shoots back with him, while my grandpa and I remained to keep digging. But then suddenly, there was a strange smell in the air. It smelt like citrusy, kind of like an orange or something. The area was full of that smell. It was kind of like being in a small room full of perfume. Everything smelt like orange, and it was almost making me choke. I looked around, but I couldn't see any flowers or fruits anywhere. We were in a bamboo grove after all, so of course not. Grandpa and I both found this odd, so we decided to quickly wrap up. We hurried down the path carrying our shoots, but no matter how far we walked, that smell followed us. I grew more and more afraid, and I clung to the back of my grandpa's clothes as I cried. After around 20 minutes or so of steady walking, we finally saw the road ahead. Relief washed over me, and next thing I knew, that orange smell was gone too. But things got real serious once we got back home. You see, by the time we got back, apparently, it was lunchtime of the following day. A whole day had passed since we separated from my parents. But to us, it only felt like 2 hours or so had passed. So how could that even be possible? My dad said he got worried when we didn't return that evening, so he went out to look for us, but he couldn't find us anywhere. Thinking one of us might be injured and unable to move, he even asked the locals and fire brigade for help, and they all searched the mountain for us, but to no avail. At any rate, we visited a hospital after that for various tests, but they didn't find anything wrong with us. When we went back to Grandpa's house, both my grandma and mother got really angry at us, and then we returned home. I often visited his house again after that, but I was too scared to ever go near the mountain again. I asked around about that orange smell, but nobody knew anything about it. The old folks near my grandparents' house had never heard of it either. This took place in an area called Inagozawa in Yamanashi Prefecture. If anyone here knows anything about it, please let me know. In this next story, a man goes for a drive to his old stomping grounds in Shizuoka, but while there, comes across a woman alone late at night. He offers to take her to a great scenic night view nearby, but when they get there, things don't go quite as planned. And little does he realize the effect she's going to soon have on his life. Find out why in Black Letter. This experience I had 20 years ago wasn't exactly terrifying, but it was so weird that I'll never forget it. Late one weekend night, I decided to drive alone to Nihondaira in Shizuoka Prefecture. I used to go running there a lot when I was younger, so I guess I was just feeling nostalgic. I stopped in a large parking lot around 2 a.m, and I noticed another car pull in as I was having a drink. Despite being a large parking lot, the car pulled in right next to mine, and then a woman got out. She went to the vending machine, bought a drink, and then started walking back towards me. Even though it was dark, I could tell she was pretty, and inside I was like, hell yeah, this is my lucky night. What are you doing? Where are you from? She asked me all sorts of questions, and as things livened up, I told her there was a spot nearby with a breathtaking night view, so would she like to join me? She agreed and got in my car. We arrived about 30 minutes later, a place called Yambara. And as we took in the view, my imagination ran wild, wondering how I might ask her to come back to a hotel with me. But then she suddenly started crying, and she said the real reason she came out tonight was to take her own life. Apparently, there was a lot of stuff going on in her life, and it all came to a head, and she couldn't handle it anymore. I pushed away the inappropriate thoughts I'd been having and did my best to comfort her. There are plenty of reasons to keep going, I said. You're a pretty girl, so don't be hasty. Dying won't solve anything. I did my best to change her mind, but honestly, I was scared. Sometimes the look in her eyes seemed dead, or like unfocused and lifeless. I don't know how to put it, but almost like she wasn't even human anymore. After a while, she calmed down. Thank you. I'll keep fighting, she said. And then we decided to return to Nihondaira. The air was heavy like lead on the way back, but I tried to make her laugh to lighten the mood. No more thinking about dying, okay? I said once we got back, and then we parted ways with a handshake. Her hands felt terribly cold. After that terribly strange night, I rushed back home via the empty bypass. When I got home around an hour later, I noticed a black letter in my mailbox. It was pitch black with no address or anything written on it, creeping me out. Thank you for tonight, it said when I opened it. I enjoyed seeing such a beautiful night view. And that was all it said. No way. Was it from that woman? I thought, but I didn't tell her my address, and she didn't appear to have followed me. I rushed outside to check anyway, but I didn't see any cars that looked like hers. Suddenly very scared, I quickly threw the letter in the rubbish, had a drink, and then went to bed. I woke up around lunchtime the following day, and when I remembered what happened the night before, I checked the rubbish for that black letter I threw out. No matter how you looked at it, it was weird. I sped home pretty fast after leaving her there at Nihondaira. I didn't stop by any convenience stores or anything. I told her roughly where I lived, but not my address. Still scared, I threw the letter back in the bin, went out to buy breakfast, and then, when I got back home again, there was another black letter in the mailbox. I couldn't stop shaking. My hands trembled like crazy as I took it out. I debated whether I should open it or throw it out, but in the end, I decided to open it. "Don't throw my letters away," was all it said. I was so scared I feared I might pass out. What on earth was going on? What on earth was this? I was beyond confused, so I called a friend, told him everything from the very beginning, and then showed him the letter. My friend didn't understand it either, but he told me to keep the letter regardless. After all, if I threw it away, then I'd just get another letter, right? And that would be even more scary, right? I was too scared to keep it, but too scared to throw it away. I didn't know what to do, but for now, I decided to throw it in a box full of my electricity and gas bills and such. Put that in another box, and then I put it in the back of my closet so I could forget about it. And so, several years passed, and I really did forget about it. But then one day, when I was getting ready to move, I found that cardboard box in the back of the closet, and all the memories came flooding back. Naturally, I didn't look inside the box again. I was a little less scared than when I received the letter, but I still didn't throw it away. I took it with me to my new address, then put it in the back of the closet again. In a sense, I once more sealed it away. Again, I forgot about it for a few more years, and that brings us up to the present. But why did I remember this story? So, a director at the company I work for betrayed me and left me with a massive debt before disappearing. I trusted him. He was the friend I told about the letter. And he took my stamp to forge my signature on some documents, agreeing to act as the guarantor of his debt. Moneylenders came into work almost every day, and then they passed or sold that debt to another company. On top of that, they spread rumors to our customers that the company was in the red. Of course, sales plummeted, and all the employees quit. More than 10 years of hard work had all gone to waste. Betrayed by someone I trusted, losing the company I worked for, and saddled with a huge debt, there was nothing left for me, and I even considered ending it all. But one day, I found a black letter in my mailbox with no address or anything written on it. Again, the memories came flooding back, but this time, I wasn't scared. I opened the letter without hesitation. "There are plenty of reasons to keep going. Dying won't solve anything," was all it said. I wasn't scared or anything. I just cried. That was what I said to that woman that time. I grabbed the box in the back of my closet and took the black letters out. I lined all 3 up and swore that I would keep living. I live a pretty poor life now, but I'm able to survive on my own. Even now, I still don't know who or even what that woman was, but I'm grateful to her. And of course, I still take good care of those black letters, even now. A kid who goes camping in the mountains of Fukui encounters something mysterious while washing up. It seems to be helpful, but what's really going on? Find out in Washed Away Chopsticks. When I was in the 5th grade, I took a tent and went camping on a mountain to the south of Fukui during the summer holidays to catch bugs. It wasn't a massive mountain, only around 800 meters or so, but there was a beautiful mountain stream about halfway up. I caught all sorts of things, like ground beetles and jumbo dragonflies. And when I was done eating that evening, I was washing my dishes when my chopsticks got washed away. Ah well, I still have a fork, so whatever, I thought. But as I was washing the rest of my stuff, those same chopsticks came floating back towards me from upstream. Considering the altitude, the stream was pretty weak, but it wasn't like it had a countercurrent or looped back around or anything. I walked around it to check, just in case, but it really was just a normal stream. To test it out, I threw a branch into the stream when I got back, but as I expected, it didn't return. Because the chopsticks were plastic, I thought maybe they were causing some static electricity or something, so I approached the stream to try throwing them in again. Hey, I'm only going to return them just one time, a deep booming voice said clearly. The voice sounded friendly, mixed in with a chuckle, and the intonation was local. In front of me was a stream, and behind me was nothing but gravel, bushes, and leaves on an animal path, so there was no way anyone could be within 100 meters or so of me. Looking back on it now, it was really strange, but at the time I was like, they won't come back again then. And if so, I'll have trouble eating my noodles. So I innocently stopped myself from throwing them away again. A man who goes fishing near Mount Fuji encounters a strange old man who isn't quite what he seems. But what's the old man's story? And why is he hanging around the lake? Find out in Old Man by the Water. I enjoy fishing, and this happened when I went bass fishing at a lake near Mount Fuji one time. I started early that morning, but I wasn't really catching much. As lunchtime rolled around, I figured I'd stop to have something to eat. And looking around, I found a stone that looked just right to sit on in the shade of a tree. I pondered how it was getting warmer as I ate my tuna and mayo, so it might be nice to have some pickled plums or something. And then I noticed an old man standing next to me. Behind me there were a lot of trees, but it wasn't like the visibility was bad, so I wondered where on earth he came from. It shocked me. But it was lunchtime and it wasn't exactly cold, and I didn't think he might be a ghost or anything weird like that. Probably just a local, so I said hello to him. "Should you be near that stone?" he asked, looking at me. I didn't understand what he meant. Was the stone important for the locals? Was it a grave for someone's pet, maybe? "I'm terribly sorry," I said, standing up and feeling a little bad about it. Then the old man walked over towards the stone. "I'm dead," he said. Again, I didn't understand him. I could clearly see him, and he didn't look like a ghost or anything scary. Plus, it was midday with fine, even somewhat hot weather. I imagined maybe he meant like socially dead, and so he was trying to end his life or something like that. But I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there. Then the old man continued. "After I died, I learned that my consciousness becomes clear when I'm near water or a particular stone, and when I'm away from that, I can't think anymore. It's like I'm disappearing, so I get scared." He went around the tree near the stone, hiding in the shade behind it, before disappearing. I had no idea what the old man was trying to tell me. Nor was I especially afraid, but either way, I still ran away from the stone as fast as I could. A young man shares a story he heard from his mother when she visited Tateyama in Toyama in her youth. A story meant to both chill the listener but also serve as a warning as well. Find out why in Tateyama Mountain Hut. This is an experience my mother had on Tateyama when she was younger. My mother and a few of her friends were exploring a short distance from Daicho Villa around 8 or 9 p.m, looking for an old mountain hut. Apparently, it was somewhere before the area with the bubbling hot springs. She told me the name of the hut, but I don't remember it. Before long, she said they saw a light in the direction of the hut. At this hour? In that direction? They were a little scared, but they decided to call out. "Hey! Are you alone?" Normally, people would shake their light in response. Apparently, at the time, those lights were generally handheld lanterns. Or yell back, or move closer, or do something. That was just how it went. But the light didn't move, and nobody called back. The light just continued to flicker in the darkness. Of course, my mother and her friends were frightened, and they debated what to do next. But then, the light suddenly disappeared. It was night on the mountain, and they were in a dangerous area. If someone was out there alone, it was unlikely they'd turn off their light. So then, what was that light? Everyone turned at once and started running. It was a rocky slope, but no one cared. It was like every man for themselves, and they fled back to Daicho Villa, out of breath. Hearing that alone doesn't sound very scary. But it turned out that long ago, a group of climbers had finished their preparations for a winter crossing and were getting ready to go down the mountain. But then they realized they were missing a worker. No matter where they looked, they couldn't find him. He was gone. The worker remained missing, and when spring arrived and they opened the hut to prepare for the climbing season, they found the worker's body in the closet with all the bedding and such. Because of the winter cold, the body had barely decomposed at all, but instead turned into a mummy. There were a few bite marks from rats, but the worst part of all was the cotton from the bedding in his mouth. He was so hungry that he had tried to eat the bedding. After that, the hut was no longer used, and they built a new one instead. My mother and her friends went looking for the hut after learning of that story, so when the light appeared, that was why everyone ran. They were honestly terrified, she said. On another hut on Oyama, there was talk of numerous people peering in from the outside at night, and apparently they even got some photos of it published in a magazine. One of my mother's friends actually experienced it too. Whenever the snow melts, they always find dead bodies. I've seen this myself several times, and if that many people have passed away, then it's honestly not that weird that things like this happen often on mountains. And they'll try to take you with them, my mother said at the end with a laugh, trying to scare me. Finally this week, a young boy heads back to his mother's family home in Ishikawa Prefecture, but that home has a long and terrible history. A history it seems it's not quite ready to let go of yet. Find out why in Second Floor. This is a story about my family. My mother's family live in an underpopulated area in Ishikawa Prefecture, a small town by the sea. Long ago, around the middle of the Showa era or so, they ran a small business there. The house was split in two parts, the store and the family home, with the store taking up the biggest part. My grandfather, my mother's father, bought that building from a certain someone and used it as is, and it was a pretty old wooden structure. I think it predated the war, but anyway, this building had a bit of history to it. The previous owner, I'll call him A-san, was rather wealthy, and he was the type of good-for-nothing bum to take good advantage of that. The type of guy who didn't care about his wife or family and spent it all on women. Because of these habits, of course, he got another woman pregnant as well, and he decided to take the child in. Of course, A-san's wife was less than pleased with this, and so the child often faced physical punishment. It's a pretty common story for that time, I think. Of course, A-san and the locals were aware of this, but he did nothing to stop it, and day by day, the child grew weaker. And then one day, the child died from illness. That was the official story anyway, but nobody knows what actually happened. The only thing for sure was that the child was regularly punished, and the place that always happened was on the second floor of the area being used as the storefront. After that, A-san disappeared with another woman. His wife burnt through all their money, and then she apparently disappeared as well. Supposedly, such things weren't exactly rare at the time, and even though my grandfather knew what went on there, it didn't stop him from buying the house. Apparently, he was a bit of a womanizer as well. Anyway, they didn't make many changes to the house and used the storefront pretty much as it was. My mother didn't hear this story until she was much older, but even when she was a kid, she didn't like to go up to the second floor. She said, it just felt really creepy. And even now, she doesn't like to go up there, even though she still lives there. And apparently, when my mother was a student, she had lots of friends who didn't want to go there even if I'm dead. And that wasn't because they didn't like my mother, you know. So, when I was a kid, my family took me to visit my mother's parents like everyone else does during Obon and the end-of-year holidays. And I also felt something creepy about the second floor as well. But I was just a kid, so like, being somewhat adventurous or maybe just stupid, I still went up there. To the second floor. I only ever went up there once, when I was in elementary school. Even now that I'm older, I don't really want to go up there again. My parents and family were having their get-together, and because I was an only child, I was rather bored. Feeling a little adventurous, I decided to look around. It was New Year's, so the storefront was empty and dim. I went down the back and looked at the narrow staircase leading to the second floor. Quite some time has passed since then, but I still clearly remember it. I climbed slowly as the wooden steps creaked. The stairs were so steep that they were kind of dangerous for a child. When I reached the top, a dim, narrow hall spread out before me. The shutters in the hall were all closed, but a little light leaked in, and I could just barely see the infamous second floor. The impression it gave me was of a dim green space. Even though it was winter, the air felt damp and gloomy. The sliding doors right next to me were open. I could see inside the room. It was neat and tidy, and if you got rid of the gloominess and weird, creepy feeling in the air, then it would look like a perfectly livable room. There were various old-fashioned objects on the tatami mats. An old container for storing things, a hibachi, and other such things. It all looked really old-fashioned. But the only thing I was interested in was the large folding screen by the wall. It was Japanese in style with a woman on it, and next to her there was a poem or something. I mean, it was the type of thing you could commonly see in old houses. Anyway, there was something weird about that screen. It was too dim to really see at first, but as I stared at it, the reason why it felt weird became clear. It was just unnatural. At first, I thought it was part of the picture, but it wasn't. I soon realized there was a stain. It was like a dark liquid had been splashed from the corner to the middle of it. That was blood, wasn't it? The moment I saw it, I don't know why, but I thought it was a blood stain. The thought immediately filled me with fear, and a terrible chill ran through me. I ran downstairs to my mother and didn't leave my parents' side for the rest of the day. They didn't seem to notice how scared I was, but I didn't tell them anything either. That night, I slept by my mother's side. A few years later, I happened to tell my mother about that time I went up to the second floor. I thought I had already mentioned this to her at some point, but apparently it was the first she'd heard of it. Anyway, she then said, "That's weird. I mean, the second floor is just used for storage. There should be nothing up there but cardboard boxes. It's been like that since before you were born." What a terrible memory that is. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn, Emerald, and Kenneth Kawamoto. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.